For those who grew up being told, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, we now see that tactic is not the most effective way to coexist. Regardless of whether you'll be traveling to see family this upcoming holiday season, or simply finding yourself in a workplace with folks whose values don't align with your own, you may face conversations where you disagree with one another. In today's episode, we offer suggestions on how to train your staff to discuss and disagree with care.
This is Camp Code, another innovative podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. Camp Code is dedicated to helping you create and facilitate the most effective leadership training so we can raise the bar for professionalism and preparedness of our staff. You can find our show notes and our blog for summer camp leaders and directors at gocamp.pro.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the, most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their campers, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine, and we need to help each other bring our very best. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're listening to this. We're so excited for you to join us for today's topic, which again is teaching staff to discuss and disagree with care. And we have some thoughts about and why we use those words intentionally and some other words we chose to opt out of. And we'll talk more about that as we go on today. But I want to make sure I introduce our co-host before we dive in. So Beth, tell us who you are.
I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro, and I was a camp director for 15 years, but now work as a consultant. And my focus is intentional leadership training and helping camps to build really solid community.
And Gabrielle.
My name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors of Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, Canada, and we focus on creating a positive female community. And we do that while speaking in French and in English.
And I'm Ruby Compton. I'm the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors. I work as a friend to camp in any way, shape, or form that I can, teaching lifeguarding, driving buses, leading hikes, whatever I can do to fill in and support camp. That's what I try to do. And I do that from primarily the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Western North Carolina, just south of Asheville, where we are having lovely, lovely fall colors right now. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, you've gotten a chance to enjoy some of those fall colors near you. All right. So again, today we're diving into teaching staff to discuss and disagree with care. And I'd love to start off with Gabs. Can you share a little bit about even why we thought this might be a good topic and some of our own experiences with it?
Yeah, thank you, Ruby. I wanted to start with a little bit of a story about us three. So for me, first of all, disagreements, it's not bad. If you have a whole team that's getting along well for too long, that makes me nervous. When is the crack going to happen? When's the big thunderstorm going to happen? Disagreements are healthy. It's a way of towards innovation. It's a way towards positive change. And but on our team, when we're developing either sessions or working towards common project or even on this podcast, of course, we discuss what we want to say and come up with a common goal and what direction we're going to go into. But it tends to happen that around the 11th hour, just before we're about to present, the night before we're about to present a new content, a new session, I sort of look at what we're doing and I say, I don't really get it. This doesn't make sense to me. And we have done all of this work and we've had many conversations. I'm involved in all of the conversations. And of course, all of our brains work a little bit differently. And, perhaps my brain needs to process and process and process. And then finally, it's sort of with the adrenaline kicks into focus gear. And then I don't understand. And that puts Ruby and Beth in a position of trying to explain it. And then me poking holes in what we're presenting. And there was one session when we were in Albuquerque, and it was the night before we had a big presentation, and about half of the presentation, I just simply did not understand, and it didn't click with me. And even though obviously there was frustration, no, I shouldn't say obviously, but of course there was frustration, and I understand that I'm frustrated too. we're able to get to the other side of it and tighten up our presentation. The key element in all of this is trust, and as well as the common goal, the intentionality behind what we're doing. And what I find so helpful in a value system within a camp is valuing the differences between how we learn, how we express ourselves. And that's going to come across in how you present staff training, how you offer staff applications. Are you providing opportunities for people to hand in videos instead of written essays, or an audible application? When you do staff training, do you have fidget toys available? Do you break up the sessions so that people that have a hard time listening for long periods of time, have an opportunity to stretch their legs? How do you honor different ways of expressing your ideas and learning? And on this team, I would have to say we have 3 very distinct, different learning styles. And before almost every podcast, even though I write my own notes before a show and my teammates tell me what we're about to talk about, such as even today, I had my own notes. I didn't understand my own notes. And before almost every podcast, I say, what are we talking about? Then once they tell me, then my ideas start flying around in my head. But that can be very, very nerve-wracking for somebody that is very prepared, organized, and puts all of their ideas together. The trust that I'm going to come and bring my A game comes out of experience, but it comes out of also questioning and asking and discussing. So creating that space of building trust, but also honoring how we do things differently can help with those moments when we get to those places of disagreement, which can lead to paths of innovation and positive change.
And can I just add that Gab pretty much does that to us almost every session.
Yes.
Every single time.
But it always tightens our session. It always makes things clearer. It always makes for a better flow. It rattles my cage a little because I am the one that comes organized and prepared, and then we have to change everything. Yeah. But it's always better because of it.
So true.
Very generous, but yes, I do.
No, it's true.
As a cage rattler, guilty.
I feel like it's almost a joke of, oh, here we are, and we're changing everything on the last minute. Yes. Here we are. Okay, let's do it. And that for me is one of my techniques of dealing with it, is like, just remember, this is a familiar thing. We always come out of the other side of this.
You do say that, Ruby. You say, we've been here before. And it always turns out to be better.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Gabs. And that's a little sneak peek behind the ladies of Camp Code, if you will. So Beth, as we're talking about this, what suggestions do you have for directors for teaching their staff how to discuss and disagree with care?
So I see this meme on Facebook or on Instagram all the time, and it always hits home with me. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I hate you. And we need to relearn that in our society. So I think we really need to think about that people can disagree and still love each other or care about each other or care about the work that we're doing. Okay, so I have not said this in a while, and my apologies if you've been with us for 8 seasons and you've heard me say this many times before, but you need to start by creating and every day supporting a positive camp culture. If folks understand and fully buy into your ideals and your why for these ideals, you will have people that will strive to treat each other with dignity and respect, even when they disagree. So here comes the time in season 8 where I highlight the 4 S's: safety, stewardship, servanthood, and self-esteem. And we created these questions over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, really, as a way for staff and campers to feel empowered to make the best decisions for themselves and to ensure a community where everybody feels valued and important for who they are. So we get everyone to ask themselves these questions. Is what I'm about to say or do safe for everyone, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually? Is it good stewardship of the environment and all of our resources? Is it serving the community and making it a better place to be? Is it building someone's self-esteem? If I can't answer yes to all 4 questions, I have to rethink things, reframe things, figure out a way to do or say what I would like to so that it works to create this space. Just think for a minute what life would be like right now if all world leaders followed the 4 S's. Just think about that for just one brain second. And once you have this culture and it's ingrained in every single aspect of camp, be it program or campfire or staff meetings or conflict, it is something people work hard to protect and support. So please understand, this is not my people drinking the Kool-Aid and then there is never any drama or friction. It doesn't mean that our people are happy all the time or willing to go along without expressing their feelings or their concerns. What it means is anytime there's conflict or a difference of opinion or anger over a decision or someone doing or saying something without thinking, then we have these 4 solid foundational pieces to stand on for the way that we treat one another. I know of staff who've gone on to use them, the 4 S's, for platforms of government in their colleges and universities, in their dorms, in their family homes. Is it something we can call each other on by questioning? Are we following the 4 S's here in this situation? What do we need to do to get back to these 4 S's? How can we reframe things in the situation, whatever it may be, to make sure that what we say to one another and how we treat one another follows the 4 S's? Trust me, it is not just another camp slogan. It truly has created a way of living, of accepting, of figuring things out together that's made an enormous difference in the lives of people at our camp. And please don't forget, this is how we treat one another at all times, in every communication, in every decision, whether campers are with us or not. It's a way of life and of living in community. And it makes the ability to disagree respectfully possible.
Well, I feel like we can't have a camp code season without touching on the 4 S's. So check. Love it. So good. And in thinking about this topic, one of the questions that came to my mind was, when have I felt safe to disagree? Or when have I felt okay to disagree in groups of people, and especially in workplaces? And so a couple of things that come to mind. And when Beth is talking about creating this culture, what does that look like, sound like? What do leaders do who want to make it okay for you to disagree and to discuss stuff that may be controversial or that people don't align on? And I think number one is to see it modeled. So seeing leaders in the organization model what it looks like to disagree, and to do so with care, and to do so where folks still feel respected or cared for. And I think we're so used to seeing the reality TV version of disagreeing that doesn't have to be reality. And so if your leaders, yeah, right. So if first and foremost, no, go ahead, Gabs.
No, I was saying that's such an important point, because the role modeling of disagreement, the role modeling of arguing, if you will, it's so amped up and it's so hyped up, and there's never a positive outcome. And that's what a lot of people see, and that's why a lot of people avoid. So I love that you brought that in.
And it's good TV, right? But it's not a great workplace. So we need to do what we can to model what that looks like. How do we care? And we'll talk more about that, caring after our ad here in a bit. I think also using language that helps all perspectives feel validated, because there is nothing worse than you speaking up and then somebody brushing you off, and your opinion kind of being like, whatever, you don't know, or, you know, you don't feel that way, right? These are things that we train our staff not to say to kids. And yet sometimes those very same statements are the things that we say and do to our staff as leaders. So we need to be really mindful of the language that we're using and telling folks, we hear you, we understand you. And I used to tell my staff too, like, if I don't really piss you off at some point this summer, I'm probably not doing my job very well. So I set that expectation of, you're going to disagree with me at some point, because your motivation here at work is a little different from my motivation here at work. And sometimes our interests do compete. And unfortunately, because I'm the boss, sometimes I get to say my way or the highway, and that's going to frustrate you. And I am totally game to hear what you have to say about that and take that into consideration for the next time. And I'm even game to step up and say, yep, I made a big mistake and I should have done things differently. But we need to have it be okay for folks to step up and make those statements, and that their opinions and feelings are validated, even if changes are not made, that what they have to say is worthy of being heard. And then finally, I think to recognize that folks may feel stifled or pressured to not speak up. And I feel this, so I work for a restaurant and we've had some leadership changes. And so the new person who is my boss has lots of opinions about how things should go. And even just today, one of my coworkers said, well, I don't understand why we're doing this way anymore. Like, I don't think that's the best way. And I was just like, it is not a battle that I'm willing to fight. Like, if you want to step up and say something, fine. But it's just not something that I feel like is worth my energy. And so I'm just going to let it be. So recognize that in your organization, there probably are things like that are happening, and someone may not speak up, but if we can offer other channels and avenues for folks to provide feedback, be that on written forms, informal evaluations, private surveys, anonymous surveys, whatever it might be, but making sure we're providing many channels for folks to offer feedback and provide some outlet for that, so that they're not just like doing it on social media because they're so upset and they can't handle it anymore. So we want to make sure that we're providing those ways for them to express their opinions that then can be validated, whether we know it's theirs or not, and modeling how we handle that sort of disagreement. All right. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, more discussion on disagreeing. Gabs, I know you're getting ready to attend the Women in Camp Summit live virtual event. What are you looking forward to most about it?
I am getting ready. I have approached my cat's feeding bowls to get closer to the screen so we could do this as a family. And I am looking forward to so many sessions. We had over 70 applicants for this summit. And that for me is just so exciting. It shows how much we want to share, how much we want to contribute. We have sessions such as anti-racism, fundraising and finance, self-kindness, women in charge, imposter syndrome. The list goes on and on and on. And I just cannot wait to hear all of these wonderful sessions.
What about you, Beth? What are you excited for?
I'm so excited to be enveloped by that community once again. I have missed so many of those faces and missed talking with them. So I'm excited to spend time online with old friends and make new friends and learn from them. And not only to deepen our knowledge, but our knowledge base, but also that sense of connection that we get with the Women in Camp Summit through our villages and our Shiro talks and our amazing evening programs. It's just going to be a great couple of days.
Yeah, the stoke is high right now in this Zoom call. I can say that much. I'm really excited this year about the creation of an allies event. We are the Women in Camp Summit, and in moving forward and having more equitable workplaces and more equitable status for women in the camping industry, the reality of it is we need some help with that too. And so I'm really pumped for there to be some time and space for folks who haven't typically felt welcome at this event to come together and talk and learn and share. So I really love that's going to happen on Friday, December 4th with the Women in Camp Summit live virtual event happening on December 2nd through 3rd. Again, that Allies event on December 4th. And it's not just for women anymore. That's what's so cool this year. And not just based on people who can travel to outside Chicago. We, being a virtual event, we're open to folks from all over. We really want you to check it out. Check out the Women in Camp Summit live virtual event. Registration is open and it is the low price of $99. And every registration paid at $99 gets a code to give 50% off to a friend. So that means you can get with a buddy, you can split that discount, or you can give that to a staff member or friend who you would like to partake in that in the event. But for $99, you get access to 2 full days of stellar programming, brave space conversations, and a community of super rad lady camp pros. So we hope you'll join us. You can check out acail.org/women-in-camp-summit.html. All right, welcome back. We're going to go around a couple more times and find out some more tips and tricks and ideas that our team has for how we can discuss and disagree with care at camp. Beth, can we come back to you? What other ideas do you have to share?
I think the other really important piece, and you alluded to it a little bit already, but I want to dive in just a little bit deeper, is to front load it at training and to talk about it throughout the summer with your staff and your campers. So talk with your staff during training about the fact that you will disagree with one another this summer. Set that expectation and talk about what to do when it happens, not if it happens. And then take time to practice disagreeing or sharing differing points of view. So ask your staff before you practice to help you come up with your staff rules for the ways that you want to respectfully disagree. So I always talk about this in Camp Code podcasts, get their input. So I would put them into pairs and ask each partnership to discuss how they have felt during a disagreement that didn't go well, where there was some real conflict, some uncomfortableness, some hurt feelings. Explain to them that they don't need to share any of the details of the disagreements or the specifics of what was said. You're just looking for them to share the feelings that they had on their end. And then bring the group back together and ask folks to share something their partner said that really struck them. Now ask their partners to pair up with at least one other pair or maybe 2 or 3 other pairs and ask each small group to discuss ways folks this summer could respectfully disagree or share differing opinions, even if they're quite passionate about it or angry. And when you facilitate, have several people taking notes on Post-its and several more people organizing those Post-its as soon as they are written into the same categories. So as folks are sharing in real time, it'll save you tons of time later. And you should be able to narrow it down together to, about 5 ways that you all agree to participate in disagreements. So when we did this exercise, these are some of the things that we came up with at our training. So 1, do all you can not to make it personal, to stick to the issue at hand. And that's really hard for a lot of us. Watch your language was number 2, so that you're not putting down the other person's beliefs or ideas. And number 3 was to use I statements, so communicating how you feel and what you think and what you need. 4 was to listen to the other point of view. Listen for learning, not just listen to wait your turn to talk. And then 5 for them, of course, was at all costs, stay calm. So if you need to, you can take a break to resume that discussion later when you have a chance not to be caught up in the heat of a moment. And they added in, number 6 was always follow the 4 S's. So now's the time to practice in training and put them into arranged pairs. I wouldn't ask them to just to get into pairs because buddies can get with buddies and it might not be as beneficial a discussion, but give them something to disagree about and come up ahead of time with a list of scenarios that could happen at camp. And I would do this a few times in that particular session, and then maybe a few more, at least once more during training. It's an incredibly important skill that will get you through the summer with a lot less drama and a lot more teamwork. So we have to give them time to practice. And I'd start off with like easier scenarios, like one partner wants to, kidnap a group of campers, skip a session time and take the campers out for a secret surprise. but the other one is concerned about breaking the rules or expectations or getting into trouble. And then give them a little bit of background on each point of view, but not too much, and just enough for them to know the role that they have to play, and ask them to disagree respectfully. And then make each scenario a little more difficult than the one before. And of course, you want to debrief in between to see how they felt, what they noticed, and how they would want to be treated in that situation. And then later in training, I would end with a scenario that really can't have any pair coming to an agreement, and debrief how they felt with that. And then talk about what might come up during camp that they just won't agree on. What's a possibility of lists? So make that list and ask all of your staff for their opinions on how they should handle things. If you've talked about it and front loaded it and practiced during training, it can give young people who haven't maybe had a lot of practice some skills, some wording that they can use, some muscle memory to help them sort of navigate disagreements going forward. And it's role modeling this skill for their kids when the kids show up. So, I mean, after all, you're not really supposed to win or lose arguments. You're supposed to win by coming to a mutual understanding and agreement. So I think it's trying to work through that and giving them opportunities to practice.
Rock on. Thanks, Beth. Gabrielle, what thoughts do you have about training staff on discussing and disagreeing?
I love, Beth, what you're talking about in the practicing the scenarios. And so many times my staff, when they leave and they move out of their folks' home and they get a roommate, they tell me about, like, you know, the biggest disagreements or arguments that they have is really boils down to leaving your dishes in the sink and not cleaning them. That's like the number one thing. And, you know, and I hope that the tools that we're giving our staff at camp is going to help them with those real life, outside of camp scenarios that they're going to build on. And in my experience, disagreements tend to build and build and build because most people are avoiders when it comes to disagreeing. They don't want to offend somebody. They don't, and they make excuses for the other person, such as, oh, they'll clean it out later, or, you know, they have exam period, or et cetera, et cetera. And there's like the hopefulness that comes along with it. And I think that self-awareness is very helpful when we're looking at disagreements and we're looking at, do you tend to avoid, or do you tend to, you know, charge in and talk about these issues? And 9 times out of 10, I would say probably 10% of your staff are comfortable saying, hey, your dishes are in the sink and could you please take them out? Now, I love those staff members, but those staff members also have to learn how to say it in a delicate way. So they have that first step, which is talking about it, but teaching them how to do so is super important. And one of the ways that I like to help staff members, you know, connect with themselves on avoidance or approaching is the simple activity of putting an object in the middle of the room. The closer you are to the object, the more comfortable you are. The further from the object that you place yourself, the least comfortable you are. And use very easy scenarios, such as, how comfortable are you painting on your face? How comfortable are you painting somebody else's face? How comfortable are, et cetera, et cetera. How comfortable are you taking the keys away from somebody if they've been drinking too much? How comfortable are you telling a friend that you don't like their top? You know, and build, keep going and going. And then start with that self-awareness. And I think that expectations of what you expect as from a job point of view is also very important, because a lot of the times our staff really look, as much as we tell them, they really look at their job as taking care of the kids, you know, making sure the equipment is fine, executing, you know, getting dressed up, but not the interpersonal relationships, and that this is part of their job. So I also have an acronym that I like to use. And for me, it's simply awareness that there's something, ACT, awareness, communicate together. So awareness that there's something that bothers you, and you want to react as quickly as possible and talk to the person about that thing that's bothering you. And then C, communicate it to somebody that can help you. Now, sometimes it's not that person because you're intimidated. Maybe it's the boss, or maybe it is your best friend and you're not quite sure how to approach them. So you talk to somebody that can help you. And of course, that's the cone of trust. So it's not to spread out to other people. And T is together problem solve. So with that person, if it's a tardiness thing, or if it is that example, Beth, that you were using of the two counselors, which by the way is me in one person. I really want to steal the kids and go somewhere and have a good time. But then I have the other paranoid part of myself that's like, we're going to get in trouble. I'm constantly pulled between these two. I was like, that's me, my internal turmoil at all times. But having those conversations and problem solving, how can we approach this and have fun by not breaking the rules, by not, doing something that our camp director hasn't asked us to do. But the whole piece that you're talking about, practicing it, and for me, it is also about starting with themselves. What is your tendency? What is your self-awareness? And what is the expectations of the organization, and making it very clear that speaking up and approaching it with respect and to resolve is very helpful. And I find that the metaphor of, like, when we have a knot in our back, that's a muscle, and you press on in it and it sort of hurts at first, but then it dissipates and you feel so much better. For me, that's the experience of a disagreement. If we do this well, afterwards you can breathe better. It's just a weight is lifted off of their shoulders, and having them talk about those experiences when there was a disagreement and creating those positive muscle memories, and then moving on from there.
Nice. So many smart things. Y'all are so smart. I love it. Oh, thanks for sharing everything. So I want to talk a little bit about some words that we've thrown around, which we've talked about respect a fair amount. And the title of our show is Discussing a Disagreement, Teaching Staff to Discuss and Disagree with Care. And initially, when we talked about this topic, we were like, it's going to, discussing and disagree with respect. And I actually think that the different words, it's really important for us to talk about why we chose with care. So I think about the golden rule that many of us learned as we were growing up: treat others the way you want to be treated. I think that's respect. I think the platinum rule that I'm learning more and more about these days, and you hear a lot more about, is treat others the way they want to be treated. That's care. And so I got a big education this summer in tone policing, and that is something that comes up a lot when we're talking about, especially people of color. There is the character of, like, the angry Black woman, right? And so what'll happen is you'll see comments that come up on a social media post, and there'll be somebody who is very appears to be, when you read it, very blunt, very straightforward. And it is not uncommon for you to see people of color to come forward this way. And that's how they're calling stuff out. And you'll see other people come back and say, whoa, like, bring your tone down, be kinder, be gentler, and truthfully, like, as of 4 months ago, that I was that person who was like, if we could just all approach this from like a calm, mannered way, we can have a conversation around it. And I have learned that's actually not the best way. Recognizing that there are going to be disagreements that happen, and discussions that happen where there may be a lot of passion, there may be a lot of hurt, there may be a lot of frustration. And just like when you're feeling really upset and you're like, oh, I'm so angry, and somebody comes up to you and says, oh, calm down. You're like, no, you're not seeing me, right? When we approach folks and say, you need to be respectful, you're not being very respectful right now, that actually we are invalidating some of their points and their opinion and their voice. So we need to do a better job of, when disagreements happen, we want them to not only happen with care, with respect, but more broadly, with care. And if they happen because we care about each other, then I think that respect piece is going to come too. And I think there are things that can be said from someone who cares a lot that sound kind of disrespectful, but in the end, it is respectful. So a great example of this is the model of radical candor as a management strategy. And if you haven't read the book by Kim Scott or listened to the podcast, it's this idea, right, that if somebody has spinach in their teeth, like the kind and caring thing to do is to walk up to them and say, hey, you have spinach in your teeth, right? And you should go get rid of that, right? And some people are too embarrassed to say that stuff. And it's also like kind of a jerk move to like raise your hand in front of the whole class and be like, hey, yo, teach, you got spinach in your teeth, you know? And so walking that balance of, I'm going to come tell this person because I care about them. It's not just about respect. It's that I care that they know that everybody's staring at the spinach in their teeth and not listening to a word that they're saying. So let's pull that back and talk about some, more difficult conversations you may have at camp this summer. If you're digging into talking about race relations, talking about inequalities with genders, whatever it might be that are some of these difficult conversations, I welcome folks to tell me, yeah, what you said really hurt my feelings. Yeah, what you said felt like an attack. And that may seem disrespectful, especially when it's coming from a staff member. But if they are willing to step up and say that, that means there is a level of care that is really important. And as someone who is very privileged, I welcome folks who care enough about me and how I interact in the world, and that the place that they get to be is a safe and comfortable and brave space for them, that they're willing to speak up and call out when things aren't working well for them. I want to respect that. So instead of feeling that like, oh, I don't like that you called me out in front of everybody, you were disrespectful, we need to look for the care. Look for the care in those disagreements and those discussions. So consider that language and think about how you may want to adjust when we ask folks, how do we want to treat everyone with respect? Can we take it a step further? Can we broaden it out? And know that care may look a little different for each person in our community.
I love that, Ruby. And I think that goes with hand in hand with the mission of your organization, whatever organization you're part of. Hopefully for most camps, that one of the core pieces is creating a safer space for our campers and staff members. And if as a leader, you're really walking the talk, and the main goal is to create a safer space. So if somebody can inform you and educate you, because that is what you care about the most, is to be informed, is to educate. And if your action is causing harm, somebody telling you that, it's so helpful. And you're right about the reaction piece. It can sting. Of course it can sting, but that's somebody that's reaching out to you and bringing that to your staff and saying, when somebody is saying things to you, what is that big picture? And it's okay that it stings, but our reaction, we have to understand where that comes from. And we have to understand that we're all here to try to do better than what kids experience outside of camp, do better. And that is a painful process sometimes, but it's not harmful.
And I think we have to remember too, that when someone is passionately upset or passionately angry, that they are approaching that from a place of care as well, that they're looking for a solution to not feeling this way anymore, or a solution to find the justice. It's not about calling you out and making you feel stupid. It's about that too. So to remember that when when people are getting passionate and maybe yelling at you for something, it's because they want to get to the other side. They want something better for all of you, themselves obviously included. And it's not just, I'm yelling at you because I want to make you feel bad. That's not the sole reason for being upset.
Yeah.
Big stuff, heavy stuff. But I love the idea of disagreeing is going to sting sometimes, and that's okay. Like, we're not allergic to it. We can handle it. It'll be okay. All right. I want to make sure we get to hear from everybody one more time. So Beth, any more thoughts on this topic today?
Just one short one. I think that the other skill I would talk about with my staff and practice during training is the ability to disagree with care and with respect with people outside of camp. At camp, most of us feel usually pretty secure in the way that we're going to be treated. At least all camps I know work hard to create that culture. It doesn't mean everyone feels this way all the time, but that's our goal. So it can be very different and very daunting to disagree with folks outside of camp, at school or at the workplace, particularly with an employer, or sometimes even with our families, maybe those that we don't see all the time or live with. So I would take an opportunity to ask your staff these kinds of questions during training. When you get into a situation where you disagree or strongly disagree with people at camp, what are our options? How might these experiences differ from camp disagreements? Should they differ? What can you use that you've learned at camp for a more positive outcome? And I would ask each group to maybe come up with their own scenario, have them write it down and pass it to the next group over. And then each group can work on the scenario that they've been given and come up with 3 things. 1, what the staff member may be feeling in that situation. 2, ways things could go very wrong. And 3, what can they do to help avoid just the very wrong, but getting to something where they're finding some sort of solution or peace. And then you can facilitate a group discussion afterwards and encourage staff to share those thoughts and their concerns and the stresses that they have when they're dealing with conflict and confrontation. Because I think that often hearing that others have those same kinds of concerns as you, as well as learning ways to deal with the types of conversations, can be really empowering. And staff don't often get the chance to have those kinds of conversations in a safer space. So I think that we can offer them that when we're at camp.
Awesome. Gabrielle, any other thoughts on this topic?
I just one sentence. Can you help me understand more? I had a wonderful teacher when I was in college. And I struggled so much with spelling and reading, writing, etc. And he was my English teacher. And I did get frustrated. I was trying so hard at home to understand the assignment, and I did the assignment completely wrong. And it resulted in a very, very poor mark. But I knew that if I was already on academic probation, and I knew this was very close for me getting kicked out of college. And so I was really, really frazzled. And he didn't know me well enough to understand that I had learning differences. And I was ashamed of my learning differences. So it wasn't something that I was shared openly. And I wasn't practiced in sharing that I struggled in reading and writing. And when I held the paper in my hand and he visibly saw that I was upset, I accused him of not creating clear enough instructions, which was very much not true. And he just paused and saw I was really panicked and asked me, "Can you help me understand more, what you're trying to say?" And even though I had said that this wasn't clear, once he pointed out that it was clear, that's when I had quite a breakdown. And just that he could have just said, "No, this was clear, there you go," and pushed me aside. But that sentence, "Can you help me understand more?" I've used so many times with staff members that are attacking me, that are attacking others. And when I see my defenses going up because I go into protective mode, I remember Mr. Larry Weller and his language and his calmness. And it's something that I teach my leadership team members on when somebody is really, really upset, is just to ask that question, "Can you help me understand more what you're going through, what you're trying?" Even though it seems clear, there's usually something else that's happening behind the scenes. So with that care that he showed me, I took his class for 3 more semesters because he was awesome and he really helped me in class. And we created a great teacher-student bond because of that kindness and him just taking that extra time to understand where I was coming from.
Love it. And I feel like this is our quick fire round because I'm going to add on to what you just said, Gabs, when you've asked that, "Help me understand, can you help me understand," blah, 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 whatever it is, then using their words and repeating back. So what I'm hearing you say is, and say those things back to them. And I've seen that work really well with someone who is processing, struggling with something, fighting through something. I've had that work really well when I'm holding up the mirror to somebody who has said something and I'm like, I don't think you intended for this to sound the way you wanted it, the way it did. So let me repeat this back to you and see if that's what you're saying, because this is what I'm getting from you right now. So what I'm hearing you say is, and sometimes it really truly is an exercise in repeating it back to them, almost word for word. Sometimes it's paraphrasing. And I think about the great Michael Brandwein activity. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember there's a part at the end where if you get it right, you high five and yell, perfect. But basically you fill out a little survey and it's all really controversial stuff. It's, political issues and then like, do you believe in aliens or not? Right. And so you rate your opinions on these different sides of the scale. And then you find someone who has an opposite opinion to you and you talk about your opinion and they can't respond to you with any sort of, but like this, really, you really believe that? They can only say, so what I'm hearing you say is, and they have to repeat back. And it's amazing how much you feel heard. And so using that technique and teaching that technique is excellent for helping folks process through and have a first move from just the defensiveness of somebody's disagreeing with me and that sting. And instead, if we can train ourselves to say, so what I'm hearing you say is this and this and this and this and this, and that allows you to slow down and find your words and even sometimes clarify, because what you're hearing may not be what they're saying. And so by speaking it out loud, it goes a long way.
Seen and heard and valued. That's what we're trying to have all of our people feel.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Awesome. What an awesome episode, y'all.
Yeah.
So many good things shared. I love it. Ready to do this training session right now. So exciting. Gabs, can you give us your world famous recap?
Yes, I'm so excited. This boils down to really what I think is three clumps of categories. Number one, setting those expectations and role modeling those expectations before people even put their foot on your camp property or parking lot or wherever you like to host camp. Meaning, how are we honoring differences? How are we honoring people's processes? How are we talking about conflict before people arrive to camp? So creating that front load before they get to camp and when they're on camp, giving them the opportunity to actually not only practice disagreements, but that they can also create their expectations for each other. And while they're practicing, why don't you use Beth's stick to the issue, I statements, listening and really listening and staying calm. And when we're looking at that, we're also re-emphasizing the mission of camp, the common goal. What are we trying to achieve? And when we do that, we want to also emphasize the care piece. So treat each other the way they want to be treated. And use sentences such as, can you help me understand? And also maybe paraphrasing. So what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, and Z. Just remember, whatever you do, the goal is that when people feel safe, then they can disagree. And disagreement leads to progress. So our goal is to get to that disagreement place, to create that safe space, and give them the tools that they need to get to the other side.
And now you see why when Gab pulls these stunts at the 11th hour, that Ruby and I don't get upset or wigged out, because she always just looks at it all and pulls it into pieces that make sense and categorizes it in a way that everybody can understand. And that's why we don't get upset.
Well, I am grateful to be in a team that is understanding.
Grateful to benefit from it all. I'm not going to lie. Oh, friends, so wonderful. Well, we hope that you will get involved with our podcast. Tell us your thoughts on this episode by using the hashtag camp code on your social media of choice. You can tell us what topics you'd like for us to discuss, any guests that you'd recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We'd love to hear from you. We are all about sharing in this industry. Also, if you found this podcast to be useful, please leave a rating and review for us in your podcasting app. Your feedback helps keep the show going. We love our reviewers so much that we have been sharing highlights here, and we would love to share one today. But we don't have any new reviews. So get on over to your podcasting app and leave a rating and review, please. And let us know that you're listening. We might even read your review here on air. Speaking of being in touch, we'd love for you to get in touch with us if you have questions or want to follow up on anything you heard in this episode. So Beth, where can folks reach you?
They can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, on Instagram at topazfaye, and on Twitter at topaz.
Gabrielle?
And you can reach me it's best to reach me on Instagram, Gabrielle Rail. Rail has 2 L's, and you can check out where I work. There's also an email there, and they'll get your information to me at ouareau.com, OUAREAU.com.
And you can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com. You can also find me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors and on Twitter at rubylyn85. And this is the part of the show where we typically tell you what's coming up on our next podcast. And truthfully, with everything that's happening in the world right now, we decided that we wanted to let some things settle out here in the next couple of weeks before we decide on our next topic. So to make sure you don't miss out on our next episode of Camp Code, make sure you subscribe to our podcast in your podcast listening app of choice. Our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training, and we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments or most effective tips. You can tell us what they are, again, using that hashtag #CampCode. And today's best practice comes from Beth.
So 2 more quick exercises for staff training. These are both ways to introduce the topic of disagreeing with care. So for the first one, you can ask your staff to stand in a circle facing in, much like what Gabrielle talked about, but just a little bit different. So it's a game of wind in the willows. So read each of these 6 statements and ask them to step into the circle if it applies to them when they're having a disagreement. And I would do this 3 times. And the first time you ask these 6 questions, and you're going to ask, of course, one at a time, you can say, this applies to me when it's just a slight difference of opinion. So maybe you're going to say it's about a favorite band or your favorite flavor of ice cream. And the second time you go through the questions in this process, you say how it applies to them when there's a difference of opinion on maybe how to handle a situation at camp with a camper, or maybe a new rule that's being introduced that they don't agree with. And then the third time, I would clarify that this is how they initially feel like behaving, that sort of go-to response they have when they're having a very heated argument over something they feel very strongly about. And encourage them before you first begin that how far they step into the circle corresponds with how accurately it describes them. So I found these 6 points for assertive skills to disagree without arguing on an article on inc.com. So read them out one by one and pause in between to let folks move into that appropriate spot. And then allow volunteers to share why they moved where they did or why they didn't move at all. So here are the statements. So 1 is focus on facts. 2 is don't get personal. 3 is recognize the good. 4 is remember to listen. 5, we've heard before, use I statements. And 6, know when to move on, which Ruby did at her restaurant. So when you have finished 3 rounds, and honestly, this shouldn't take too long, like 10 minutes, facilitate a group discussion about how easy or how hard these 6 points can be and why. And then ask them why more people stood outside the circle as the rounds got harder. And what did they learn from this exercise? And of course, why do they think you put them through it? And the second really quick idea is to find one of those images that can look like 2 different things depending on how you look at it. So if you Google one drawing, 2 images, you'll find a whole bunch of these. So print one off or put it on the screen for everybody to see and ask them to decide what it is, but only show it really briefly and then take it away. And ask for all those who saw 2 vases or vases, for example, to stand to one side, and all those who saw a woman's face stand to the other. So that's a very famous example. I'm sure we've all seen it. So I would choose a more obscure one. And then ask them to partner up with somebody on the other side and argue their point. And of course, you're going to debrief the exercise and end again with asking them why they think you had them do it. And I think that both of these can lead nicely into a session on learning to disagree with care. And there is that famous quote that says, when we agree to disagree, we honor the relationship above trying to change the person. And at camp, we always honor the relationship. So we also want to remind our staff that at camp, we always have to carry ourselves with the knowledge that we're setting the tone for the people who come after us. We're those role models. So this is an important skill that we want to work on and we want to teach the world how to do better.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Beth. I was furiously typing in notes, and one of the notes I put in was, remember the dress that everybody was saying, which color is
Yes,
it?
exactly.
So there'll be a link to that in the show notes. Don't worry. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode. And from all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.